Hey everybody, Chad Wesley Smith here for Juggernaut Training Systems. Today I'm going to be tackling one of the most common questions and in a lot of ways toughest questions I get asked is how do you find your MRV? So MRV is a concept that we've talked a lot about, especially Dr. Mike Israetel. And your MRV is your maximum recoverable volume, the most training that you can tolerate and recover. And recovering is going to be defined as a return to baseline, like a return to the ability to do normally expected training. So if this week you squatted 300 for 4 sets of 8, and next week you went in and tried to do 310 and you went 8, 6, 6, 4, that would probably indicate that you are not recovered. So knowing what your MRV is going to be really important to make sure you're training as hard as you possibly can, so you're making the fastest improvement that you can without training too hard, getting into a state of non-functional overreaching, or even worse, overtraining. So the first thing that we need to do in helping you find the best estimate that we can at what your MRV actually is, and you're only ultimately going to be able to find it through trial and error, carefully tracking your training, and all sorts of fatigue indicators along with that, sleep, how your joints feel, how you're performing, of course. So what we're going to try and do here is give you the best starting point based on all these different individual factors. So in doing that, we need to assess the athlete effectively. So whether you're using this for yourself or as a tool with athletes that you coach, these are the questions and the things that are going to be really important to understand in regards to how your athlete likely recovers and how much training they can likely handle. First, we want to go through gender, male and female. That's going to have a big impact as the lower testosterone levels in female athletes and smaller bodies, shorter and lighter, less muscle, means that they often can tolerate higher volumes of training. An athlete's body weight, we break into 4 categories here, from light, and that first number, 57, would be a light female, 75 a light male, all the way up here to super heavy, 90 plus in the female category to 125 plus for our male lifters, middle and heavy in between. And body weight and even more so muscle mass is going to be significant there. The more muscle an athlete has, the more muscle they have to damage during training, and that more damaged muscle is going to take a little bit longer to recover, be a little bit harder to recover. Height is going to be significant for the athlete. Again, the first number is for female athletes, the second number for male athletes, going from short, medium, tall, and very tall. The taller an athlete is, the farther the bar is moving on every rep. So they are doing more work per rep. And as we're going to be talking about MRV in terms of a number of sets, of overloading sets per week, if they're moving the bar farther on every rep, they've done cumulatively more work in every set, it's likely that they're not going to be able to do as many sets. Strength, going from low, and for this I'm using the USPA strength standards, which you can find on their website, or I'll link them in the video info below. They break things into classes. Class 3 or 4 would be low strength, moderate, class 2 or 1. High is a master or elite total, or you could even get into doing this on a per lift basis. And then finally, very high strength would be the international elite standard. The stronger an athlete is, the more weight they're lifting, means that that weight is going to be more taxing to their system, more neurologically taxing particularly. And absolute weight is more important than relative weight as well. So the very high strength, super heavyweight lifter who's squatting 800 pounds is going to be generating more fatigue than the very high strength 75 kilo class lifter who maybe is squatting 550 pounds, just because 800 is more than 550. But a lot of those differences are accounted for in the weight and height categories. Experience is going to be very important in regards to how much training the athlete can tolerate. So we're going to call beginner athletes as athletes with less than 4 years of training experience. Intermediate athletes with 4 to 8 years of experience, advanced athletes 8 to 12 years experience, and very advanced athletes with 12 plus years of experience. And it becomes a little more complicated how experience affects an athlete's ability to tolerate volume, because athletes at the beginning of their career don't need a ton of training to improve. You've felt those beginner gains at some point in your life, as well as they don't have very high special work capacity, so they can't tolerate a lot of training. And then as they get more and more experience, their special work capacity increases. They're able to tolerate more training because they're essentially just in better shape for it. But that is actually going to start to tail off at the end, because they become very advanced. Then they're very likely lifting such heavy weights with that it's becoming more fatiguing, and they're operating so close to the maximum of their career potential that every rep and every set that they do is generating more fatigue, so they likely won't need to or be able to recover from quite as many sets as they could earlier, and there may be a buildup of injuries along with that in a 12+ year training career. Age is, of course, very important in your ability to recover. I remember training 3-4 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week when I was in high school, and even the thought of doing what I used to do makes me overtrained now, and I likely did get overtrained at one point during my high school career. But we break athletes into categories by biological age here: less than 19 years old, first category; 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, and 50+ years old. And I get asked all the time about how should I adjust my training. I'm 45 years old. Like, what suggestions do you have for me in regards to training? And there's so many different ways that you could arrive at that point in your lifting career. A 45-year-old who's been lifting for 20 years versus a 45-year-old who's been lifting for 2 years is going to be different considerations. But for the same athlete, as they progress in age throughout their career, likely are going to be able to tolerate less training as they get older and older. Diet and sleep are two of the foremost things that are going to contribute to good recovery. So poor diet, we're going to classify as not getting sufficient calories. You're not getting enough to help repair muscles and recover. An average diet, we will call that the calories are where they need to be, but you're not taking into account the macro breakdown of those calories, nor any regards to nutrient timing. And then finally, a good diet, that's when you got your RP template and you're just nailing it. Your calories are on point, with the good macro breakdown, and you're properly timing them around training. Sleep, that's when the most recovery is going to be happening, when you're sleeping. So if you have poor sleep, sleeping less than 5 hours a night, we'll call average 5 to 7 hours a night, and good sleep habits would be consistently 7+ hours per night. Stress away from training. Your body doesn't know the difference between a squat, a exam at university, arguments with your significant other. It knows stresses being imposed upon it and the fatigue that generates from those stimulus. So if you're working, third shift manual labor work versus someone who sits at a desk, or like me, works from home and maybe has kind of Netflix on in the background as I write programs and review athletes' videos, you could go from high away from training stress to low away from training stress, and that has to be accounted for because your body doesn't understand that it doesn't differentiate what the stress is. It just understands stimulus and stress. So you can rate yourself there as high away from training stress, medium away from training stress, or low. Performance enhancing drugs, of course, those matter in terms of how much training you're going to be able to tolerate. We're going to get into talking about a little bit about the magnitude in which they matter, but we'll keep this simple and just go with yes or no in regards to performance enhancing drug use. Potentially could I add a third category there of like no, yes, or hell yes, and in regards to the amounts that are being used? Possibly, but I'm going to stay away from that for now. And finally, our last one, historical recovery ability. What kind of training have you done in the past? How did you respond to that? This is the best way that I can account for genetics, the genetic recovery ability, because I don't have some way to go in and extract your DNA and look at all the different genes that are going to contribute to this. So we just need to be a bit subjective and think critically about how you've responded to training in the past, whether you think that you generally have a poor ability to recover, below average, average, good, or you have an exceptional ability to recover. I've always been able to train at a pretty high volume, especially considering where I'm at on some of these height, weight, strength, and experience categories. So with that, that's going to influence whether we tend a little bit to the higher side or a little bit to the lower side as we find our MRV. So we're going to go through this big questionnaire. You're going to answer all these questions for yourself. Your athletes can answer them, but if you want to print that out or something, I can put the PowerPoint in the comments as well. You can download it, circle, do what you need to do there.